What's up, guys? Tim Little, Matt Allen. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we finally made it in this buyer's guide. Ultra high-end gear. The best of the best. This is our favorite topic.
It is.
Let's go.
If you guys are watching this the day it came out, welcome to Black Friday. It is no mistake that we timed this video for this day. A lot of people love high-end tackle. We are not the only ones that are complete junkies for this stuff. So we timed it so that if you are interested in high-end tackle, you could get the best bang for the buck today, right in the middle of all the sales. Now we are talking the absolute best of the best. Now, a lot of people don't realize that really high-end stuff, most of it is on sale during Black Friday sales, even though it says they're not.
Right.
The only one that we know for sure isn't is Megabass. All the others are included even when they say they're not. If you complete a sale, follow through, check the final receipt after you've paid, it's on there. With that, why don't you kick us off?
All right. So how we set this up, I guess we'll talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, it is different than the other videos.
Yes, we didn't plan this at all. We each were giving each other, we each gave each other 10 rod and reel combos. So I have my 10, he's got his 10, and yeah, no rhyme or reason, just why we picked the 10 that we did and why we like the rods and reels that we picked. So
just straight up geeking out on high-end tackle.
Personal owned gear, and yeah, let's go. First rod and reel combo I'm going to talk about. You guys know how much I love the 852 spinning rod in the Loomis lines. The NRX Plus, NRX Plus is the cream of the crop. That 852, if you guys watched last year's video, you know that that was the first ultra high-end rod I ever purchased. Caught hundreds of weightless Senko fish on that rod. It used to have a little Senko on there, but that 852 spinning, by far my favorite all-around spinning rod. So I started with there, paired up with the Shimano Stella. I mean, that name Stella kind of speaks for itself. Buttery smooth. Where this differs from, let's say, the Accents or other reels kind of in that price point is the drag. I don't think you can compare how smooth the Stella drag is to any other reel. So if you're using light line, you know, a lot of these combos, I know for me specifically, don't get much use around these parts, but when we start hitting up clear water, you know, big smallmouth where you just have to rely on your gear, you can't overpower the fish, that's where you need those really nice rods, sensitive, and then more importantly, really good drags. But that 852 paired up with a Stella doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, that's geeking out pretty good on high-end tackle right there. So I snuck a little peek ahead of time because we picked our own gear here. Our lineups look completely different. Tim has 5 spinning rods over there, 5 casting rods, right?
Yeah, I was trying to do it even, 5 and 5. Did you not do that?
I got as close to even as I'm gonna get.
Okay.
3 spinning rods, the rest is casting for me. So for mine, I'm kind of going most finesse up to my heavier techniques. First one up for me is the Megabass P5. So those are the JDM rods that they brought over. The P5 baby plugging. This is a 7.2 rod, so it's a fairly long rod, but it is incredibly light. It is unbelievably light. It's almost overloaded by a Ned rig. And no joke. I mean, it's crazy how light it is, and as a result, it is so much fun. I took this on multiple northern swings this year because we went a few times. And I had this thing so bent over on some great big smallmouth. I paired it up with the new Accents. The Accents got a revamp this year. The thing to understand about Accents, because when you get to these high-end reels, you're like, well, what's the difference, right? What are the giant jumps between these? The Stella is just, it's as good as it gets. What makes Accents so unique and why we enjoy it so much is that the Accents was originally designed to be a saltwater reel, a finesse saltwater reel that carried over to freshwater, and everybody in fresh latched onto it. So it is a sealed reel. It's designed for salt, but it is so capable, and it's incredibly light. So that's why you see us pick this reel up so much in the last few years, is because it balances out so well. It's so smooth, it's so light, and it goes so well with these finesse options. So this little baby plugging, incredible for the Ned, incredible when I'm hair jigging. That's one of the things that I do it a ton. Throwing little hair jigs for giant smallmouth, so much fun.
Yeah, I actually got to play around with that combo, Matt's combo, earlier this year when we were up north, Lake Michigan, throwing hair jig, and that was the rod. Yeah, that Stella, the drag is buttery smooth, the accents, just the handle turn, everything about it's buttery smooth, just a different feel. So my next combo is gonna be still in the NRX line, NRX Plus line. It's gonna be the 822. Now the reason I picked these rods, the 852, it's just a must. It's a staple in my fishing. That weightless Senko rod, you can use it for so many different finesse fishing techniques. If you need to go a little bit lighter, that's where you get into that 822. This is the drop shot rod. So if you are a finesse fisherman, light line fisherman, finesse, ultra finesse fisherman, you can't do better than this guy right here. That 822, that drop shot rod, 610, paired up with an X-Sense. Again, buttery smooth, it's light. You know, you wouldn't want to necessarily put a heavier reel on a light rod like this. This is so light in the hand, and you're looking for just those little subtle bites, right? This rod is gonna show it to you, you're gonna feel it, and then balance really, really well with that lighter X-Sense. This is another must-have. So if you need two must-haves in the ultra high end, for me, it's gonna be the 852 and then the 822. Those are the 1 and 2. That's why I went with these two first.
Okay. So for me, you guys know this. I spend a lot of my time power fishing. So when we go finesse fishing, I often go really extreme, right? I'm like, well, if I'm going ultralight, I'm going all the way. Let's go throw some straight 5-pound fluoro and little tiny hooks and chase these giant smallmouth. So my number 2 is actually another super, super light rod. This is also an NRX Plus. This is their Ned rig rod. It's the 821. So it's an light. Yeah. It's as light as it gets. It's even a power lighter than that drop shot rod. Truly a dedicated Ned rig setup. I mean, just crazy, crazy light. But I've had a blast. When I'm north, I throw the little tiny tube a lot. I throw the Ned rig a lot. Throw the hair jig a lot. So I've got multiple ultralight rods laying on deck so that I can just grab and go between these different profiles. Sometimes you're throwing a little TRD. Sometimes you want that little Ned tube. Sometimes you want different profiles. So I'm always switching between them. I paired this one up with the Twin Power. This is a reel that I rave about all the time. Now, unfortunately, last I looked, the Twin Power was out of stock. For the most part, I was actually surprised. As hard as this year's been, and as much as we've talked about it through this buyer's guide, there are stock issues everywhere. I was actually shocked with the higher end gear. Most of it is in stock, at least it was right now. And the things that aren't,
one less thing in stock.
Pretty sure a deer just dropped in the forest over there. Wow. The things that aren't in stock, like NRX Plus, they're brand new. So they came in a short wave. We were able to get them. People bought them up and then they were gone. There's another wave coming. So you can pre-order those. You can order them even though they're out and they're coming soon. The Twin Power, I don't know. Hopefully there's some there. Hopefully you can order them. But the Twin Power is essentially, the way I can best describe it is it feels like a Stella for significantly less money. It has that same feel. When you spin that handle, they're very, very similar, but it's significantly dropped in price. It's still a high-end reel, but nowhere near Stella in terms of cost. So that is a great reel when I'm trying to set up a handful of high-end combos and I'm not trying to be completely broke. The Twin Power is a really good compromise.
Too late.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, when I'm trying to throw all my money into casting instead of spinning, that's a really good option.
All right, next combo up for me. I didn't want to go NRX, NRX, NRX. So want to give you guys some options. And when you start getting up into these price points, there's a lot of different brands, a lot of different models on the market. But I'll say there's only really a handful of companies that I really feel are
actually there.
A
lot of people throw a rod in there.
Yes, yeah. Another company, another option for you guys that have done it is going to be the high-end Dobyns, the Ecstasy line. You know, for years they had the Champion Extreme, that was their high-end line, and then they went to the Champion HP, and then the Ecstasy. So if you are a Dobyns guy or want to check them out, the 752, so 7'5", 2-power rod. It's a very, very good, great universal finesse fishing rod. So 7'5", 2-power, so you can throw your shaky heads, your light Texas rigs, your Nico rigs, any of that. I wouldn't go like ultra drop shot. That's where I'd go with that 822. But anything in that a little bit larger finesse category, this rod is money. And I went ahead and paired that up with the Daiwa Certate. Now, like Matt explained with that twin power, when you start getting into this gear, you start noticing the little differences, the subtle differences. So if you like the Stella, the way that feels in your hand, you might not necessarily like the Accents or the Certate. They all feel different. So for me, when I'm fishing ultra finesse, I don't want to feel a lot of resistance in the handle. I want to know that if I feel resistance, I'm either loading up on a fish that just picked up that bait, or I'm coming through something. You know, so, you know, and I know you like to have that.
I like that connected
feel. You like to feel connected, right? So it's just two completely different things. So that's why I paired this combo up. This is a great combo. I mean, super smooth. I mean, they're all smooth. You can't go wrong with any of these combos.
Right.
But wanted to give you guys another option. Very, very impressed with the Ecstasy line. And again, Daiwa just has that different feel when you turn that handle.
Good choice. My next one, I'm going another direction. Like Tim said, branching out across brands. This is St. Croix Legend Extreme. Specifically the 7.6 medium. Okay, I paired that up with the Stella. Truly an ultra high end, just as good as it gets. It's AGS guides, super lightweight guides, incredible combo. Now, for me, when we're talking about when we talk about ultra finesse spinning, in my mind, I'm going north. Because when I need this is when I'm chasing giant smallmouth. Because they have so much power in clear water, I need sensitivity, and I need to be able to survive with light line in a fight against a huge fish, right? So that's what a lot of these combos are for me. Other guys want a super high-end rod to drop shot largemouth. They want a super high-end rod for this technique or that technique. This one for me, the 7.6 medium, is my tube rod. That's a dedicated combo. That's what I do with it. I throw the tube on this rod, and I've never found anything else that compares with it. When I'm throwing a tube on light line, that is my combo, period. I love it. It's the perfect, because it's a 7.6, it's the perfect balance. I've got incredible sensitivity, but when I'm throwing light line across distance, in clear water, a lot of that fishing is about really launching a bait. I've got that long rod where when I get a fish that eats way out there, on that light line sometimes, now here I'm straight braid, but sometimes I'm fluorocarbon, I can really put the hook to them and really load up that full 7.5 foot rod and get those fish pegged when they're way out there. And then I've got all that rod loaded up, bulldogging against that fish as they're fighting me, because light line, big fish, it's not about dragging the fish to the boat. It's about surviving that fight with those fish. Just letting those fish bulldog and do their thing. I love that combo for that style of fishing.
And just to add, not straight braid. He's throwing a leader to that.
Yes.
Just
Yeah, there's like a 25, 30 foot leader on this.
Yeah. On your tube, is that your finesse tube rod or your everyday, you know, 3/8 half ounce?
So I don't do a lot of like cracking a tube, the heavy tube thing that you guys see Tim do in video. Typically, when we're out fishing and you're doing that, I'm throwing a jig.
Yeah.
A lot of times, that's a 1-2. So when I say a tube, this is a lot of finesse tube fishing.
Very cool. I agree that especially...
Hold up. Did you just agree with the combo I picked?
I'm going to agree with what he explained. I'm sure he learned it from me. that longer rod, especially in that ultra clear water. Now, when you're talking about going north, we're talking about 20 to 40 foot of visibility.
Yes.
You're talking about fish that are spooky. So that longer rod gets that light bait out there. And then, like you said, when you load up on that thing, that rod tip is just coming and going. And those big smallmouth are cartwheeling out of the water, and that rod is just playing them. So you definitely have a lot better chance of successfully getting those fish in the boat with the longer rod.
Yes, and it's not just smallmouth. I mean, we used to do it with the giant spotted bass. On Clear Lake when I was guiding and it was a finesse bite, we do the same thing on giant largemouth. Just load that rod up and you just feel those big old head shakes. And you're just load it up, letting them go.
Next combo up. Talked about the 7'5" 2-power. This one's a little bit shorter. This is a 7'2". This is the Megabass Windbuster. Now, just to be clear, this one is not on sale, but I felt like it is important enough or good enough to be in this lineup. Anybody that's fished a higher end Megabass rod, anybody who's fished a Megabass rod in general knows the quality that's there. This new P5 line is amazingly light and sensitive. So if you are a Megabass guy, definitely check this out. Again, that's the Windbuster. This is a good all-around spinning rod. It's kind of funny now that I'm saying it out loud. Typically when I get into this, I mean, not typically, all these rods have a specific technique that I use them for, but my techniques and stuff might be different than your techniques. So this is a good universal spinning rod.
Yeah, you know, not everybody's gonna buy 5 or 10 of these rods.
Right. So I have a drop shot rod, I have a hair jig rod, I have a finesse tube rod. You know, when you start building these combos, you have a very specific, at least I do, a very specific use for that combo. Now you can get away with throwing a lot of different things on them, but and that's one of these rods. Very good universal ultra high-end rod, paired up with the new Sustain. Now we talked about the Sustain earlier this week in a different video, and I just want to clarify. I did say that I didn't like the old Sustain. You know, it was just one of those feelings that the feel of it, I personally didn't like. It's obviously a great reel. A lot of people like it. It just has that different feel. The new Sustain is amazing, which is why I paired it up on this combo. You know, it feels a lot like the new Accents. You know, they kind of went away from that old Stratic feel. And went more towards the Accents feel. So again, love that. That is the new Sustain. If you guys haven't tried these out, they are nothing like the old Sustains. Very light and very smooth. Again, another awesome finesse setup.
You know, while you've got that in your hand, speaking specifically about the Sustain, I compared the twin power to like a drum down Stella.
Right.
That is like a drum down Accents. It's saving a ton of money over an Accents, but is an incredible reel.
Yeah, this reminds me nothing of the Stella. It reminds me a lot of the Accents.
Yeah. So somebody who wants to take a leap into high-end gear, but you're not trying to take a leap into 10 combos, that is a high-end reel that doesn't cost like some of the high-end reels, and then a rod that will do all sorts of things. That was a really good choice. I'll give you that one. All right, now I'm branching out now. I'm switching over. I'm talking bait casters. I think you've still got some room to go on spinning.
I have, yeah.
Okay. You guys have heard me preach the MBR actions from G. Loomis, right? And I'm going to do it again. So if by some miracle you've survived and never heard me get up on my soapbox, I'm sorry, today's your day. But to kick it off, this is the G. Loomis Conquest. So they're high-end 842 MBR. It is not one of the MBRs that I constantly preach. It's the 2-power. That's what that 2 on the end means. It is way noodly. I mean, almost equivalent to those first couple spinning rods that I was talking about. This is a rod that is incredibly light in the tip and also incredibly light in the mid. You could absolutely take this rod and substitute it in for a lot of spinning rod techniques. It's that light. I've paired it up to an Aldebaran, which is hands down my favorite high-end finesse bait caster. That Aldebaran is amazing. I use them for way too many things. I mean, we've talked about that over the... I do things with Aldebarans that they were never designed for, And ultimately, I'm probably going to destroy them because I beat them to death. You know, cranking on them, things they're just not meant to do.
I have seen people frog on that reel. I don't frog on that reel. I do draw a line in the sand somewhere. But it's capable.
It's an incredibly capable reel that can handle really, really light line, really light baits. It can do so many things. This combo I geek out on because it is so light. I got on an incredible bite, and I may have even talked about this last year because I think this one was in last year's video. I got on a bite throwing wacky rigged Senkos to big smallmouth in cover, and they would tear me up. Oh my gosh, it was fun. But I can pair this thing up on straight 8 to 10 pound fluoro, stick one of those fish, and you're just in for a ride. And then if you need to strengthen it up, you go to braid. It'll act a power heavier than it is, right? You have more horsepower than to stick them. But an incredibly light bait caster that is a true crossover, almost like BFS, a true crossover between spinning and casting, and such a fun combo. Not the first rod that I would buy, not the first high-end combo I would buy, but if you just want to have a blast, that's a really fun way to go.
I won't say finesse. Last spinning rod combo, like I said, I did 5 and 5. I will say this is probably the most, I got excited the most about these rods coming back. This is the NRX Plus, but Loomis, for whatever reason, decided to cut a bunch of their models a few years ago. And the 901 was one of them. That is an amazing hair jig rod. 7'6", 1 power, and this thing loads all the way. I mean, you don't get to the backbone until about right here. It loads deep, but that's what you want when you're throwing 4, 5, maybe 6, but typically 4 and 5 pound tests on a hair jig. So this isn't the rod for everybody for every technique, but ultra finesse. If you're throwing the little Okashira head, or you're throwing like a little hair jig, lighter Ned rigs, that sort of stuff, and you just want that long castability with that 7.6 rod and that light 1 power tip, this is an amazing rod. I'm so glad that they came back with it when they reintroduced the NRX Plus line. They revamped the NRX, and they brought they added a bunch of models, but they brought a lot of the staples back, so very happy about that. And then because I need the drag, I went ahead with the Stella. You know, it's, again, when you're fishing ultra light line and you need that drag, I don't think you can beat the Stella, and that's what that combo is. Again, just like Matt said, this isn't the first combo I'd buy if I was going into ultra high end, but if you are one of those guys that like to throw hair jigs, like to throw light Ned rigs, little tiny finesse swim baits, this is an awesome combo.
So the same way that I preach MBRs, Tim has preached that 901. On and off camera. So I love that baby plugging. I have so much fun with that rod. But I heard Tim preach 901 so long, so many times, that when it came back in NRX Plus, I still bought one. Because I had to know what that hype was about. It takes a lot for somebody to get that jacked up on a rod, right? I had to try it. That is an amazing rod. That's one of those just incredible ultralight rods. Now, shifting gears. My rods are getting stouter as I go here. So we're getting into some more backbone here. We're going back to Megabass, another P5. This is the Dark Sleeper. Not hard to guess what I use this rod for. I've got it paired up again to an Aldebaran. When I find something I like, I don't mess around, right? I have found my favorite ultra high-end bait caster for finesse techniques. So here, it's paired up to straight 12-pound fluorocarbon. When the water's crazy clear, I go down to 10, but typically it's 12. That's what I throw that Dark Sleeper on. This rod is incredible for that. It has a ton of backbone, but a soft tip section, and it is so much fun when they eat it. When they make the mistake of eating my Dark Sleeper, they get a face full. I have so much fun with this thing. Now, one thing about that name that I think is misleading is people see that name, Dark Sleeper. and they're like, okay, I know what that's for. But this is a 7'1" rod that can do a lot of things. So the Dark Sleeper rod, I would not be afraid to immediately turn around, throw finesse jigs on, I'll bet I could throw your heavier tubes on it. It'd be good for a football jig. It is actually a very, very universal action, and I think the name misleads you away from how many things it can do. Especially because every time you see it in my hand, it is in fact slinging a Dark Sleeper. That is so much fun.
You know, I went back and forth. I too went with a P5, but last year that was in my top 10, and I think this was in your top 10. But I went the Z crank.
Oh, that was in my top 10.
It wasn't until last year that I got this rod, after Matt was raving about it, because I use the 610 medium for a lot of different things, but that's not real. Even though it plays in the higher level quality of rods, with the big boys, it's not truly a high end rod. So this is called the Z crank. This is another that Megabass, the P5. It's an awesome blade bait rod. I threw this a ton this year, and so that's why I went back and forth when I was trying to figure out. I didn't throw a lot of kite. I mean, I did, but I
not like normal.
Not like normal. Yeah, it was just a different year. And this was, especially out here on Chick and just where I've been fishing this year. I used this a lot more than I did the Dark Sleeper rod this year. So same thing that he just talked about with his P5. Such a light tip. You could throw light crankbaits on this. It's designed for their Z crank, the Z1, the Z2.
Tiny crankbait.
Little finesse cranks, but again, it's a phenomenal blade bait rod. Little square bill rod, a little bit shorter, but again, very, very sensitive, very light. And then I paired that up just to keep the balance right, keep everything ultralight with an Aldebaran. Braid to leader. I got light braid on there with a little bit, 15-pound leader for fishing out here on Chick. But this is an amazing combo if you like throwing blade baits or little tiny square bills. I'll say finesse finesse crankbaits.
Yeah, little tiny guys.
Right.
Yeah. So it's funny that I was thinking what you started to say, which is, hey, why did we swap rods? And when we picked these 10, the fun thing about this video is it is straight geeking out on tackle. And we're geeking out on the tackle that we really latched onto that year, right? And fishing styles, trends, what you're catching them on, personal confidence shifts.
Bites change.
Year to year. It sure does.
Right.
I mean, I just tore them up on a Dark Sleeper this year. It had to be in there. It had to. And that's how I get here. So here we go. Are we ready for the soapbox? We ready to do it? Loomis MBRs. This is the Loomis 844. So the GLX 844C MBR. Last year I had the 843C MBR in this video. I'm using the GLX because it is a high-end rod. Now the same rod exists in NRX Plus and all the way down the line, but I have not yet purchased it in NRX Plus. Frankly, my GLX is awesome. And I have 2 of them because I use it that much. I mean, there are times where those are the only rods I go out with. You're talking about a rod that I can throw a topwater on and then turn around and throw a jig on. They're that universal. It's all about how these rods load. The tip is so light that if I'm working a topwater out here on Chick and a big largemouth eats it and I just lean on them, that tip loads up deep and I can play them right there in the last 1.5 feet of that rod. And my hookup to land ratio with the topwater on this combo is incredible. I paired this up to a Metanium. I don't know how I got through all the way to combo number 6 and didn't get to a Metanium. This is the Metanium MGL. This reel, when this came out, blew my mind. So what the Aldebaran is for all of my finesse techniques, the Metanium is for literally everything else. Now that's not to say I still use a Metanium DC, I still use Bantams, I still use Chronarchs, I use Corrados, But if there is one reel that truly is just this mind-blowing slam dunk, in my opinion, it's that Metanium. I can frog on it, I can finesse on it. The distance you get out of that MGL, we've been preaching MGLs all week, right? The distance you get out of those MGLs is mind-boggling. You put a frog on this thing, it's off the horizon.
You can almost spool it.
You can almost spool it. It's incredible. So that reel just pairs up amazingly on literally anything. All right, I'm gonna get off the soapbox. That was pretty short for an MBR.
Yeah, that's a little tiny box. I 100% agree with that Metanium. I haven't gotten really into my lineup yet. I brought one, but yeah, I mean, I throw the Met DC. I throw the Aldebaran on my finesse rods, even though the Metanium could. That Metanium, I have all my frogs on it. Just the castability, all those MGL reels are awesome, and that Metanium is just the cream of the crop. That is, I mean, when they came out that reel, that was a grand slam. I mean, they killed it with that reel. I couldn't believe it. I loved my old Metaniums, and these are so much better. It's ridiculous. So, next combo I got for you, it's gonna be a Croix. This is the Legend Elite, but specifically it's the 610. And again, bites change, inventory changes. You know, we love the X Pride 610. I went out and got this guy right here, and I absolutely love it for throwing topwater. I spent a ton of time this year chasing big spots, you know, blueback herring eaters, and just throwing topwater out there in open water. And this thing has a little bit slower tip than the 610 medium, but it is a phenomenal rod. And I like that slower tip. It just loads on those treble hook. It just loads a little bit slower, lets those fish get them. That, you know, comes up and doesn't unload when those fish come up jumping and stuff. But this little 610 is awesome. It's very light. It is sensitive, but again, I'm throwing it for topwater, and paired that up. Even though it's not a high-end reel, I could have put a Metanium on here.
Right.
I paired up with that little 70 MGL, and this is one of my, this is one of my favorite combos to throw. It's just, you know how you just latch onto these combos and you just have that, you just have fun throwing them? That little 610 with a little 70, you know, walking that bait all day, you don't feel the pain in your forearm or your elbow or your shoulder. It's just a fun combo to fish, and I don't feel like I'm losing distance or castability with that little 70 size reel. It's just a cool little combo, and it made my top 10.
Nice. I remember the day you built that combo and then just waylaid some smallmouth. It does not surprise me that Corrado stayed on there. My next one is going a completely different direction. This is Poison Adrena. This is Shimano's highest end rod. Now, granted, they do have the Conquest, kind of a pairing between Shimano and G Loomis, but that's a G Loomis. Poison Adrena is truly the tip top of US Shimano. This is the 7.2 Heavy. I use the 7.2 Heavy in the X Pride for all sorts of things, and this is just that to the next level. Even more sensitive, even crisper. It's an incredible rod. So I use a 7.2 for, what don't I use a 7.2 for? Everything. Everything all the way up to finesse frogging, like the KR. I throw the KR on the 7.2. Sometimes I'll pick up a jig. I've thrown everything from a jig to an A-rig. I mean, it's just that rod that I just always have on deck if I need to tie on anything. A fluke, you name it, grab a rod and go. It's just always there to be a workhorse. And in that Poison Adrena, it's incredibly sensitive too. I paired that guy up with the Antares, Shimano's highest end bait caster. An incredible, incredible combo. At that point, you're just geeking out, right? The Antares is another one of those reels. It's like the Stella, where you're just, wow, right? It's just fun to fish with. You know the quality, you can feel the quality, but in the hand, you also just plain know what you're using. It is an unbelievable reel, and it's just downright fun to fish with some of that ultra high-end gear. There's more than one reason to fish with ultra high-end gear. One, you can just flat geek out on it. It's fun. Two, sensitivity is incredible. 3 is the medical side of it. A lot of people have issues with the elbow, with the shoulder, with their wrists, and that higher end gear tends to be much, much lighter. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but much, much lighter weight and easier to use day after day after day. So there are a lot of people that use super high end gear for different reasons, and all of those reasons are good reasons. This particular reel for me, I use because I just want to geek out. It's super fun to fish with.
That's the reel that wins all the casting competitions. That is
the big guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
That Antares, you can cast farther than any other reel with it. My turn?
Yes.
All right, my next combo up is gonna be the NRX Plus 853. Now I went back and forth between this or the 854.
Is that the JWR, right?
Yes. Yeah. I love both of them. But I also really like the 894, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So I went with the 853. I think it's a more universal rod, especially if you want to throw lighter stuff with it. You know, so your lighter tube, you know, not your, how do I even say this? You know, a 4-power heavy action rod's a little bit heavier than the 3-power, right? So you can get away throwing more things with the 853, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Very, very sensitive, very light. Like Matt said, it's shorter, it's easier, more comfortable to fish when you go with the shorter rod. I got that half-ounce tube on there. This is what I was fishing recently. I was cracking a tube. You know, doing that with a shorter rod's a lot easier on the elbow and on the wrist than with an 894 or an 893. So that's why I go with this guy right here. So the 853 is a fantastic all-around rod. I went ahead and paired that up with a Met DC. You know, this is, the benefit of the Met DC is obviously the computer inside, right? Helping you to not backlash. It makes it easier to skip and throw in the wind. So when I'm up fishing smallmouth lakes, it's typically, you're either fighting a big smallmouth or you're fighting the weather, right? Those are the two things you fight when you're up there chasing those fish. And just the DC just helps when you're trying to make those really long casts in the windy conditions. So this is my, I guess, finesse kind of windy combination right there. The Met DC paired up with that 853. The 854 is great too, but I'll talk about another alternative here in just a second.
Okay. My next one up, I'm doing another P5. Those rods did a lot for me this year. This one is the P5 Tequila Bacharach. Also paired to a Met DC. The day I got this rod, I put that reel on it and it has just never come off. As I was standing here looking at this while you were talking, I'm looking and seeing that my line is destroyed. I have been through it with this combo. The Tequila Bacharach it's a funny rod. Let me read the rating here to you. So it's a 7-foot, brace yourself for this, 3/4 ounce to 4 ounce, 7-footer, 4 ounce, 12 to 30 pound line. That is the most bizarre rating written on any rod blank anywhere. And they mean it. So much like my MBRs, where I say I can do all these different things with this rod. Same deal on a much stouter scale. So now you're talking about a rod where I can throw a jig on it, I can throw a Texas rig on it, I can light flip on it, I can throw a glide bait on it, and I can throw a big swim bait on it. If I find myself in a pinch and I don't have my swim bait rod with me, several times I've put it on this rod and been able to pull it off. Now, is it my favorite swim bait rod? No. No, I like that longer handle. I like really loading into those fish, but it will do it. It works great for flipping. It works great for throwing that jig. It's just a rod that you can throw on the deck, sort of like an MBR or a 7.2 or a JWR. You throw those rods on the deck and you just know that rod's gonna get me through all sorts of things that I run into today. When you're going somewhere you're not familiar with, you know there's days where you go out with a box. You're like, I'm going out there and this is what I'm doing today. And there are days where you open the lid and you're like, there's 600 pounds worth of stuff in here and I have no idea what these fish are going to eat. That's where these rods come into play, where you can just adapt and do all these different things. And then with that DC on there, same thing. I can adapt and I can do all sorts of different things. That reel is extremely forgiving and will let me throw a frog, a jig, flip, throw a swim bait, all on that same stick.
All right, for me, I just talked about that 853 JWR. Now I want to talk to you guys about the 894. The reason that I didn't add the 854 in there is because I throw this rod. This rod is my do everything, go everywhere rod. You know, you can throw big Texas rig worms on it. You can throw swim baits on, light swim baits, Kitex, 4.8s, that sort of stuff. You can do a lot of things on a heavy action rod. This rod right here, I'll read the ratings. It's an 894C, 7'5", and it's rated 5/16 to 3/4 ounce. So you can do a lot of things on it. You know, you can throw heavy jigs on it. You could throw light A rigs on it. You can throw, you know, 3/8 to 3/4 ounce Kitex, Matt Allen swimbait heads on Kitex. I've done it. Boat flip 6-pound smallmouth on this rod. I love
the rod.
This is the rod.
Oh
this
my
is
gosh.
This is my all-around favorite casting rod because you can do so many things with it. The 854 is great too. I just like the little bit longer rod for this. It's just more, I can do more things with the longer rod. Pair that up again with the Metanium. Don't want to go, I don't want to continue talking about that. I mean,
are you sure? Because I'm about to do it too.
It's, you can't say enough good things about this reel. I mean, it's one of those things, it's one of those reels that I could literally replace all my other reels with. It'll replace the Corrado 200. It'll replace the Aldebaran. You know, those are little different reels, and they're little niche-y reels that you can use for different things. But if you need one that could do it all,
that's the one.
Frogging. I mean, you can send a frog, like no, I'm not exaggerating at all. You can almost spool this reel with 50 or 65 pound braid on a frog. I'm not exaggerating. It is that, it is that smooth. So 894 Metanium MGL is my workhorse in this price range. I mean, it is the do everything combo for me.
I'm not going to go on the rant about the reel, but I'm going to tell you that I have a Metanium on this rod again. This rod, this is a St. Croix Legend Elite 7.4 heavy. The 7.4 heavy, I love this rod. So I went in deep with this rod this year. I got it in the Legend Extreme first, and then I geeked out on it so bad that I wanted another one. But I didn't just want to buy two of the Legend Extreme because one, that's expensive and insane.
Right.
And two, I wanted to try it in the other line. So I picked it up in the Legend Elite as well. Both are fantastic. This rod for me this year, when we went to Florida in the, it wasn't even spring, it was still wintertime, just became that rod that I had glued in my hand, doing all sorts of different techniques. The thing that stood out to me the most, when I was thinking through which rods do I want to talk about, I had this just replay going of all the times that I had fish eat the swim bait, small swim baits, while we were down there, whether that was a Kitech or the Gambler, on a beast hook, and I would just crush them, and I'm looking at this blank loaded up, fish back in lily pads, and I'm just wrenching on them, wondering if this rod is going to explode, and they just never did. It would just drag those fish out of there. And I could just replay so many of that same on different fish. This rod had to be in here. That 7.4 heavy, a lot of times when you have a heavy rod, they don't have a lot of tip. This is one that still got a good tip section to it, but it's stout. I mean, we're not talking like an MBR where it's got a little noodle on the end of it. It doesn't. But it's also not a pool cue, right? It's not like a dedicated frog rod or something where it's just a broomstick. It's in between where it can do a lot of different things. And like you were just saying about the 894, the 7.4 heavy, if you're a St. Croix guy, is that rod that just will do all of those power fishing things. You want to throw a jig, you want to throw a beast hook, you want to throw a flashy swimmer, you want to swim a swim jig, you can do all that on that one rod. And then again, paired with a Met, I mean, it doesn't get a whole lot more do everything.
Right. I will say, I'm blown away at that whole entire Legend Elite line. You know, I was kind of late to the party on the whole St. Croix deal. You know, it's always, from the West Coast, it was always kind of known as like a northern brand, a smallmouth.
Like, why do those guys throw those rods?
Right.
Yeah.
And now it's, I have 3 or 4 of them I throw all the time. I love them. Very light, very sensitive, very comfortable, and definitely will be branching out in those as well. Last rod for me, I don't know how many more you got.
This is my last one.
Just talked about that NRX Plus 894. Here is the same rod in the Dobyns Ecstasy. I talked about the Ecstasy a little bit before, and the spinning, same deal. If you're a Dobyns guy, this is the cream of the crop for the Dobyns stuff, and it fishes like an NRX. This is the 754, so 7'5", 4 power. Same thing as the 894, right? And I paired that up with, that's the Met DC. Now you could put a Metanium on here. In fact, I interchange them all the time. But I love this rod. Earlier this year, we were down in Texas, and we were throwing big Texas rig worms through rock.
This is the rod I was using for the same thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Just a great, just like that guy, just a great do-all rod. You know, that 4 power, kind of that lower end of the heavy action rods. You can just do so many things with it. It's super universal. And again, it's kind of weird because we're getting away from the technique specific rods that you would think that you would have. Granted, I have specific techniques for this rod, but it's a very universal rod. So if you are getting into you want to purchase your first high-end combo, go with one of these guys because you can use it for more than one technique. But you guys cannot go wrong with either of these two.
My last one is going to be a whole different ball game. But it is a rod that I threw a ton this year and in previous years, and caught some of my biggest fish this year. So that same trip, Tim was talking about throwing that rod. I went on that trip too, but I flew in. I talk a lot about these rods. This is a travel rod, and it makes it into my high-end list, which is mind-blowing. Unbelievably sensitive, will do so many things, and it's in 3 pieces. If you had told me that I was going to do anything high-end on a travel rod, I would have thought you'd lost your mind. Right? Travel rods in the last few years have come so far. Not all of them, but a couple of companies have really ramped it up. This is a Megabass. This is the Triza series. Triza, who knows? No one can pronounce the names of Megabass rods, right? But I try. I give it my best guess.
Megabass
anyway.
Anything. You're like, is it Hazdong, Hasdong?
I've got no clue.
Dark Sleeper, that's easy.
So this one is the Stim Palisades. I have no clue. I always just guess. But this was the first travel rod I bought from Megabass. And I do say the first. I bought 2 more after this. This rod has been with me for a few years, and it is incredible. If I wasn't looking at it to know it was a 3-piece rod, I'd have no clue. I've pulled freeze frames out of video where I'm just loaded to the max, and there are no flat spots. You can't tell the joints are there. As bass fishermen, we think 1-piece rods. I don't want a 2-piece rod, right? That's the bass fishing thing. These connections have come so far. I would fish with a 5-piece now, and you cannot tell the difference. So some of my biggest fish this year came on this rod, but it is so convenient because I can break it down and take it everywhere. I can throw it in the truck. I can take it on an airplane. It'll go anywhere with me. I pair it up with a Metanium. Again, it is a high-end combo, and I am not screwing around. I'm not trying to go across the country or across the globe and have my gear break. Right? When you travel like that, you take quality, not necessarily high-end, quality. That's what matters. Yes, this is high-end. It is also incredibly quality, both rod and reel. This reel has been through it. This rod has been through it, and both have held up remarkably well. This particular model, and again, we haven't even said this yet, and we're at the end. We will link every single one of these rods and reels in the video description. Every single one of them. And for every model, we'll tell you our favorite, or for every line, right? So in the Triza series, we give you favorite models. In GLX, in NRX Plus, favorite models for every one of those to really help you guys dial it in. But this particular combo has been incredible for throwing everything from a topwater to a Texas rig to a jig to a 10 and 12 inch worm on heavy tackle down there on the Mexico border and just laying into great big fish and no issues. If you're a guy interested in higher end travel gear, or you're just a guy who wants a rod in the truck and you're willing to buy quality gear, this thing is incredible, and I wanted to end it there.
I want to say two things about this rod. I personally have had my rods broken on 2 different trips, putting them in a rod tube, flying across to wherever I was going. Once I was flying south of the border to Mexico, to El Salto, and had literally all of my rod tips snapped off. And there's something to be said when you're investing so much money in a trip like that, to have your rods over your shoulder on the plane. You have your reels in your reel case with you, you have your rods with you, and just the peace of mind, not wondering, wonder which rod's gonna get broken this time, right?
Right.
And the second thing, maybe this is, I don't know, I thought it was genius. I don't know why most companies don't do it. I have a few different travel rods, but just putting the little guides on here. When
the little dots?
The little
so
dots.
You can line it
just
up?
Literally line the dots up so you're like, oh, my pieces are put together straight. That is such a minor thing, but goes such a long way. So it's really easy to put the rod together, but that is a fantastic combo.
You nailed it with the travel. If you guys have never traveled, you haven't experienced this. It's completely different than driving to the lake and hoping your rods are still on the seat next to you in your truck.
Right.
I have never lost them on the way somewhere, which is a miracle. But I lost an entire tube of gear coming back from Canada. All of them. All my combos gone. Just lost. And that was when I made the leap. That was when I was like, it's over. I am never doing this again. I'm finding quality travel rods. I'm going to do it. And I did. It worked. I carry these things on the plane in a little tube. It's my extra item. It's not even my carry-on. It's my personal item. And I know that my rods are going to make it. My cameras and my reels, they're in my carry-on.
Computer, yep.
Everything that I need for my trip to be a success, except for the baits. But baits can be replaced almost anywhere in the world. Tackle, rods, reels, they can't. Everything that I need for a successful trip is on my person when I travel now, and that's amazing. And what I love most about these is that it's really hard for people to commit to like a $400 travel rod when they don't have that nice of gear at home. This is such a nice rod that sometimes I feel funny doing it. Here. I straight up fish it at home all the time. I'm walking out the door and I'm like, oh, I need a worm rod. And I grab my travel rod and it goes out onto the boat and I go fishing. It's that good.
Guys, there it is. You know, from year to year, bites change, our opinions change, our confidence changes. These are this year's top 20 combos for Matt and I. Yep. You know, a ton of fish caught on all of these, a ton of confidence, and a lot of fun. You know, lots of fish catches, lots of fun, lots of stories, lots of memories. This is where we live. This is where we love geeking out, building those combos, putting this reel on that rod.
Yep.
This is it. This is the cream of the crop. Guys, just like Matt said, down below in the video description, we'll link everything for you. Hopefully this stuff is still here for the sale, and you guys can either share it with your loved ones so they can buy you the stuff you want for Christmas, or you can go buy it for yourself.
Yep. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you guys.